if you subscribe to the logic that our minds are flawed, right? The way our minds work lead us astray in many ways, right? We've talked at length about biases and different holes in how we think, shortcuts we take, all sorts of different things that lead us to think subjectively, irrationally, overly emotionally at times, and ultimately not logical is the way I would put it. If you subscribe to that belief, you almost have to believe that nobody's immune to that, right? It's an ongoing active effort and battle almost internally to fight that off and to constantly be trying to work against it. It doesn't end. It's not a race that comes to an end. I don't believe there's a point you hit a certain degree of enlightenment or knowledge or wisdom where you've now overcome that. I think you can overcome it, probably not completely, but you can overcome it, considerably. But again, it doesn't end. It's something that you have to keep going, you have to keep working on. You can't put it into autopilot. And so again, if you subscribe to that belief that the flaws are there and that it's an active, ongoing thing that you have to do, it's very important that as individuals come into positions of influence, come into positions of power, or whatever it might be, that they remember that, and that your past, from the Eddie Murphy old comedy skit, I believe it was Eddie Murphy, what have you done for me lately? It's kind of that mentality, right? What you've done in the past, what you've discovered, thoughts you've had, actions you've taken, things you've achieved, all of that is great. But when it comes to this topic, when it comes to thinking better, when it comes to, trying to identify objective truth and really understand the full picture, it doesn't really help you. I shouldn't say that. It could help you if you allow it to, but it doesn't ensure anything for you. And I don't know that that's thought about or remembered or considered enough. I talk a lot about confidence, and in many ways, confidence is a dirty word, because it's so dangerous. You can call it confidence, you can call it power. They're all kind of interconnected. All these things, the fear is for me is that all these things lead you to switch to autopilot. No matter how good you were, no matter how thoughtful and aware you were, at some point when you let confidence start to creep in, and oftentimes power brings confidence, or influence or followers or whatever it is, once you let confidence creep in, you're in trouble, right? Because all the things that you need to do to be active and aware of the flaws that our minds have, confidence becomes, it overrides all that. It gives you this view, this confidence that you're no longer susceptible to that. And you don't have to worry about it. You've got it figured out, which just inherent in it, as I say it, you can't, right? You don't have it figured out. The confidence, it's a moving target. It's a changing thing because of the way your mind functions. So you can never allow yourself to get to that state. And as I look at our world today and what's going on in the world, for me, that's one of my biggest concerns. And saying it, maybe the other side of the same coin of confidence, the lack of humility and humbleness, staying grounded, is the thing that really concerns me. And this cuts across all political spectrums. I think this is just human nature. But where I'm seeing it most now is, you'll hear it referred to as like a cancel culture, or canceling people and whatever you want to call it, but it's in the movements that are happening right now, you're seeing lots of people being called out, and there's leaders that are starting to emerge, and they've gained some influence, and they have views, right? Which, if I'm giving the benefit of the doubt, and for many of these people I don't know, they've spent time thinking about these views. They've come to some of these views that are deeply insightful and in some cases radical or revolutionary and just all different things because they've been thoughtful. They've seen a system, they've questioned that system, and they've explored other options. They've done a lot of the things that I would argue are really, really important skills to have. I can't speak to their self-reflection, right? Their introspection, but I would assume there's some degree of it. At least there has been. But what seems to happen, as it almost always does, is that you hit a point, right, where you get to a certain level of influence. You start getting a certain degree of positive feedback, a certain number of followers, a certain number of responses from people that seem meaningful, or at least just enough people that issue kicks in, right? Confidence starts to creep in, and the humility starts to slip away. And you start to question less. You start to be much more confident in the things that you're believing, in the enemies that you see, in the people that are getting it wrong. It becomes very easy at that point. One of the telltale signs, I think, of people that are starting to shift from, humility and thinking better and, being self-reflective and all those things towards confidence is calling out other people, right? Pointing out the flaws that everybody else is doing. And I can speak to that from myself because I guess in some ways I used to be, I don't think I had power per se or influence, but just because of the flaws in my mind, I was much more confident in the past. And what that often led to was me judging other people a lot more, and feeling like I had some moral or logical high ground. And you see that today. You see it often. And it's not a bad thing to question people. It's not a bad thing to push people to be better. It's the way in which you do it. Do you do it with humility, or do you do it with supreme confidence, where you are dictating the terms and you are wielding the influence or the power you have in such a way that it's no longer a fair fight. And I think where it gets interesting in today's world, particularly when it comes to like the racial topics and the racial justice topics, is there's often a sentiment of, hey, this hasn't been a fair fight for a long time. So if I'm not playing fair now, or if I'm, using whatever influence or power I have towards the end that I think is necessary, that's okay. And maybe it is. Maybe I'm missing it, or maybe in the grand scheme of things, it is okay. And it's, in the terms of the universe, it's fair and it's the right approach, because that's what's going to get the change done. But I can't help but believe that it's not. That, you might get there anyway, but there may be more casualties, literally or figuratively, along the way. It may take longer. You may not get the exact change you want, or at least to the level in which you might have gotten it, if you keep that humility. And I think there's often a confusion for, confidence and passion, maybe, or mistaken. Perhaps, somebody might interpret what I'm saying as, you have to be passive completely, and you can't be too aggressive, and you can't be too passionate or excited. It's got to be a very calm, humble, almost, kowtow to people to some extent. And that's not at all what I'm saying. You can certainly push what you believe, as long as you're pushing it in a way in which you are open to the idea that you might be wrong. You're open to the idea that there might be a better way, and you don't have supreme confidence. I think that's really the game. If you can achieve that, if you can mix and marry those two things together and have your beliefs and have your views and the changes you want to drive and all those things, but keep that humbleness to say, like, hey, I'm not better than anybody else. I don't see this better than everybody else by any means. So I will approach this in a way in which I will be open to being wrong. I will listen to what other people's views are, not because I need to agree to them, not because I need to bow down to them in any way, but because there might be something to it. And I don't think I'm the supreme being that has all knowledge and all influence. So I would be silly not to. I could, right? I have the power, I have the influence to dismiss other people. Perhaps the circumstance justifies it, where I don't owe them anything, and I could just say, I'm not even entertaining what you're saying. But that's the point, right? To really do it right, I think you have to go against that unbelievably compelling human instinct to do that. and you have to stay humble. Martin Luther King comes up. We talked about George Washington in a past video when he gave up power. Similar sentiment. Martin Luther King with his quote, hate doesn't drive out hate, only love does that. That viewpoint of, to me, what I find so compelling about that, it's poetic and it's beautiful to some extent in its wording. I think what I take away from that is that it's getting at this idea of humility, right? Confidence usually breeds hate to an extent. You become so certain, it's easy to hate other people. It's easy to see everything they're doing wrong and get angry about it. Love is that thing that keeps you humble, keeps that humility there, and maybe stops you from doing that, stops you from looking to lash out at other people, but rather try and just figure out the solution. So, I think there's some proof points of people that perhaps were able to do it, to keep that humility, to stay grounded and seeing results through it. And again, I recognized how hard it is. It's not natural. It's not something that we are accustomed to doing. And probably consciously, it's not something that we think about enough. But I think that's the point. We need to think about it more. We need to, particularly those people in power, particularly those people in influence. Remember what got you there. Remember the approach you took, and keep that. Right? I said in another video, keep that same energy. Keep that same energy. Keep questioning. Keep challenging yourself. Be your own biggest critic. Don't become the biggest critic of other people. Don't be somebody that's canceling other people. Look inward first and challenge yourself. I just think the message will be that much more meaningful. It'll be received that much better. And your objective will be reached that much more efficiently if you can do that. It's a theory, right? I understand there's differing views on this. I understand the view that sometimes force is needed and aggression and violence or whatever it might be. And maybe sometimes that is needed, right? But I believe that at the core, right, with the underlying thread of it should be this humility, right? This pushing away confidence, pushing away the view that you have it all figured out. I believe that's really the key, the magic sauce to it.